ANEC Sports presents a Frick Media Productions, created by the founder and editor at the ANEC Network, Sam Frick. Now it's time to know your volleyball. Hello and welcome to episode 1 of Know Your Volleyball. My name is Sam Frick of ANEC Sports, and joining with me is Joe Northern from SummitCitySports.com. And Joe, you cover a lot of volleyball, and so this 2025 season has been a very special year because we have the Carroll Chargers defending their state championship. We have Angola coming off a state run last year. Southwood always being up there in the midst as well. So Northeast Indiana volleyball is alive and well so far this year.
I would not only say alive and well, but alive, well, and thriving this season too. Obviously, yes, of course, you do talk about the big programs just continuing to dominate really their respective classes. And it really hasn't seemed as if either teams really at the top have lost any steam from that. Instead, finding ways to retool, reload, I think has really been more so of what we've seen. But also, too, keep in mind some of the smaller ground teams really still continuing to make some noise, even some surprise teams that I know we'll talk about coming up a little bit later on. But no, safe to say it's been a busy already 2 weeks for us on the network with, again, just a lot of great action of what we've seen. So looking forward. And guess what? We still have another 6-7 weeks to go, if not more. So
hopefully more, so we can get more teams going to Ball State once again this year. Obviously, with Summit City Sports, you covered a lot of Concordia, you covered a lot of Dwayner, you covered some Belmont as well, which they got a big matchup tomorrow at Heritage against a rival school in the Heritage Patriots. But I want to shift over to some players that maybe rise in stock this year. Not so much the big names per se, because for instance, with Angola, I think we know Maya Harris is the star of Angola. She's going to Illinois for a reason. She's leading Angola almost every category, doing everything for the Angola Hornets. But I think one name that surprises me so far as one that's really stepped up this year as a sophomore is Chloe Stanner of Angola. She looks like she's going to be the successor in the future to lead the offense for the Angola Hornets.
And really, that's one thing I was talking with Coach Harris on last week of really how he's kind of had to reposition Stanner again from originally being in that defensive specialist spot, now kind of being the glue that holds everybody together. And really, in the last match that I saw her play Tuesday night, I think I could tell that she's really starting to gel in kind of her own. And again, speaking with Coach Harris, he has said that it's one of the toughest things to really move one prime position player to another spot and trying to gel and see what works. But I think also, too, knowing that no one can replace, obviously, the Harrises. There's no way that's ever going to happen. But what you can do is continue to find the unique talents that he's been able to develop, and this only just his second season leading the helm at the Hornets. So I think, again, Chloe Stanner's really been a good one that's I've really kind of kept my eyes on. Again, we've covered a lot of Angola early on in the season, but there's also one player that I would really like to comment on, not from Angola, but for Concordia Lutheran and Blackwell, who is just an absolute dynamite force for Coach Trish Martin and company just a freshman. Come on now. That's only going to get better for Trish Martin and company. And she's got some really good key position players too. And a lot of people are kind of sleeping on Concordia Lutheran coming into the preseason. I was initially whenever doing my research to start this 25 campaign, but I think, the cage has certainly been rocking very early this season. And again, I go back to that first match against Homestead. That really kind of set the tone for them as it stands thus far.
Yes, Sydney Blackwell's been impressive for the Concordia Cadets, and they've always been up there in terms of that 3A state ranking and whatnot for them, as well as Bishop Dwayner. Another freshman that from just north of Concordia, from Garrett, is Kaylee Garr of Libero of Garrett, and they had to replace quite a bit in that back row. So I think Kaylee Garr coming as a freshman and leading away in DID so far has been impressive for the Garrett Railroaders. And then a sophomore in Wells County, Abby Pell, still leads the state among sophomores in hitting percentage by 150 percentage points. She's hitting .613. She's just a sophomore, and she's getting visits all across the country, Division I visits.
Again, if you have that much of an advantage over everybody else, you're going to get looks at a D1 level and super early on too. So yeah, couldn't agree with you more. couldn't agree with you more in regarding Abby. But also, too, you kind of mentioned in one of those surprise teams in Garrett. I mean, again, started off the season 4-0. I mean, yes, you could take a look at the schedules like, well, you played so-and-so, so-and-so. This is a team that was well sub 500 last season and now have completely found a way to right the ship. And I think, it is going to be a little more interesting in the NECC, getting them involved and making it a little bit interesting against West Noble. So as the season goes on, we should say.
Yeah, especially with Garrett kind of retooling on the fly, if you would. Another team that I think is moving their way up is Eastside, and they haven't had a lot of success in the last 10 years or so. Off to a 6-2 start, the best start since 2014. And the Eastside just won a tournament at Westview over the weekend and whatnot. West Noble's always up there in the Northeast Corner Conference with Elise Mead and Ella Limerick of the West Noble Chargers. So the NECC's got some talent there as well. East Noble's moving their way up as well with the East Noble Knights. They got a nice incoming group next year that's going to be really good for the Knights. And in Columbia City with Bree Rumschlag, they're not quite there yet, but they're slowly moving their way up in the Northeast state and whatnot.
Absolutely.
Another team I want to mention is Warsaw, and Warsaw's having a spectacular season. Probably should be mentioned in consideration for 4A. One player to mention other than Ellie Hepler, the libero who's going to Indiana, is CC Good. Leads the states in kills with 162 so far this year. Warsaw is serving extremely well, and they are a very talented team, but they're also a young team as well. So I think Warsaw is going to be a team to watch over the next couple of years.
And really, though, too, you say a team that you're going to be watching for the next couple of years. They're a team that really could be primed to make a run right now that you will. They have a pretty favorable sectional draw, or at least in their region this time around. So they could make a little bit of noise. Again, this is only week 4 officially for these teams, really just, still trying to get to know each other a little bit. And I think you're still going to continue to see that once we, at least get another week or two in. But by mid-September, it's going to be really interesting to see how things are going to shake out for Warsaw. Again, I think really continuing to move up. Their schedule doesn't do them any favors at first, obviously, but that continues to pick up for them as time goes on. So we'll be interested to see what's going on with Warsaw and just how they can continue, how they have really started to shine a little bit more of a light lately. And again, there's some other teams that I want to keep an eye on too, that I don't know if we've touched at as it stands right now. Woodland and South Adams. I mean, you talk about the ACAC gauntlet. Those two, same sectional, both still starting out super, super hot this year. I know, again, you mentioned Reese Beltier, the sophomore, 2.7 kills per set. But the senior and Reagan Bolenbacher, continuing to lead in hitting percentage, averaging just a little over 2 kills per set as it stands. Lehman, just an absolute total force on blocks. I really like of what I've seen from the Starfire this so far. And again, they played a very good Belmont team 4 sets. I mean, of course, obviously, the differences of 2A and 4A. That's just natural. We know that's always going to happen. But I think, really kind of coming out and, not losing your first match until August 25th, as I'm looking at right now, and only dropping 6 sets this year. I mean, it makes me feel like, that the South Adams team could finally get over the hump and try to finally get past Woodland for the first time.
Yeah, and the thing about it is the schedule is kind of laid out where towards the end of the season, you're going to have Woodland on that schedule, and then Adams Central will be their last conference match. Keep this in mind, Joe. The ACAC has a tiebreaker system in place, so each one of these games matters significantly to decide the conference, because there's no sharing in the ACAC, which is probably why the conference is so difficult to begin with. Not to mention Adams Central, a team that graduated quite a bit, they're still right in the thick of things as well in the ACAC. And the Heritage coming off a sectional championship last year, they're also in the midst as well. So I've always said in the 2-state the ACAC is probably the most underrated conference in the state.
Absolutely. And I can tell you that September 30th game, we hope to be out there for that. We currently have it on the schedule to be out there for that match. I feel like it won't be the last time that we'll see South Adams and Woodland really connect at it. I mean, yes, this one to maybe win the league, but also too, you have the gut feeling that they'll be meeting sometime in mid-October.
Yeah, we kind of expect that as well. And then, shifting over to probably the most intriguing state tournament in the state of Indiana, is obviously the Class 4A. And we mentioned for so many years about Yorktown and Hamilton Southeastern, Muncie kind of taking over the spotlight in terms of the state. Carroll winning a state championship, or Yorktown last year. They returned everybody but one player. And then you got Sarah Stiegel, breakout junior season for the Carroll Chargers, the Notre Dame commit. And Carroll's got a difficult couple weeks coming up, couple tournaments coming up. Saturday, they're gonna be facing like Yorktown. They'll be facing Hamilton Southeastern, Noblesville, I believe, and then Zionsville. So they're going to be, with Carroll not playing a conference, they're going to be front loaded with some indie area schools coming up to get them ready for 4A.
I mean, absolutely. But again, you take a look at how they've been really preparing themselves to get to this point with those big matchups coming up in the season. Obviously, you haven't dropped a set to begin with. I mean, of course, and that includes taking on Homestead twice, sweeping Homestead twice in a matter of a week. Bishop Knoll winning that 2-0. And I think, again, and I know you'll be talking with the coach, Pandy Sinish, coming up in just a little bit. I know that this is a team that's just never settle. And they know they have the right forces to prove it. And I think if they can continue to really provide such a commanding effort up front, especially again, as you mentioned, just the upfront line for Carroll has been absolutely dominant. Addie Shippey, too, another player you got to keep in mind, currently hitting at .470 on the season. Sarah Stiegel, standout junior, This is just a Carroll team that I feel like it's their world, and we're just living in it right now in the 260. But I think we'll know a little bit more once we see those matchups with Yorktown and Hamilton coming up later in September. So I think, right now, if we had to kind of give a little bit of like a power four, a power Mount Rushmore, I think it's hard for me to say that Carroll is not only the number one spot, but certainly deserving of a number 2 and number 3 on top of it. I think that's the level of talent that we've seen from them this season, and proving that, the repeat train is well in sight, honestly.
Yeah, but as we know, 4A is always difficult. There's no guarantees winning the state championship. Hamilton Southeastern was a defending state champion last year and lost to Carroll. So it's always a difficult 4A state tournament and whatnot, especially when you're going through the Muncie schools to even win the state championship and whatnot. So, Joe, my next question to you is, as we get to September, what are some headlines or some storylines to keep an eye on as we get to September? Some conference matchups getting underway, one of which comes from the Northern Lakes Conference, with Warsaw taking on Mishawaka, probably one of the prime contenders in that conference to try to sneak up on Warsaw. But what are some headlines coming into September?
I think, again, it's really, you've got the August jitters out, and we're really kind of starting to see teams really kind of either A, get into their own, or B, really try to figure out, okay, what can we do to make this work? What are some things do we need to focus on? Do we finally get settled into our rotations? So I think with teams that have had a lot of shifting and a lot of moving around, we're going to finally see them kind of come into their own and get more so in place. However, again, too, I think the other headlines we'll have to take a look at is that, are these teams for real? Is Carroll for real, trying to go back to back? Is Angola reloaded, retooled, ready to go? Do we see some of the SAC teams start to make some noise? Again, I know we mentioned Concordia, despite being at 3-6, still a very young team with a lot to look forward to and improve on. Belmont, 5-6 on the season. Again, losing your star player before even the season starts. I think that's something really to kind of keep in mind, because it's really, how well have you retooled in the first 2 weeks, and how is that going to count for you when it comes to league play? So I think really the time for retooling is about up. I think, again, we'll start to see a little bit more of that coming up in the next week or so. But really, once you hit, about that September 15th time frame, I mean, some leagues already will be in conference play, no question. But I think we're going to start seeing, who has really answered the call, and really who's been rejuvenated to stand out, quite frankly.
That is for sure. And so I want to now take a step back and ask a little bit more about volleyball in general. You call a lot of games in the Summit City area for volleyball and whatnot. When you call a volleyball match, it's very different from calling a football game or a basketball game and whatnot. We all know that. But when you call a volleyball match, what's the most exciting part about calling a volleyball match? The basics.
I think for me, and I know you say obviously yes, a little bit different than calling football or basketball. To me, that's not necessarily the case because you can still develop a level of intrigue and develop a level of anticipation. And I think that sometimes people don't think about, really think about in a match from time to time. It's like, oh, you get a great swing attack. Think about the ones that just have, coming straight out of nowhere that gets the team up off the bench. Think about riding that momentum of rattling 5, 6, 7 in a row after being down 6 or 7 points in a row. I think, really just seeing how the momentum just completely shifts from one point to another is certainly something that's really underrated, quite frankly. And really, one thing to note too is that nothing's even guaranteed, even if you're close to trying to go for a 3-set sweep. Cannot tell you how many reverse sweeps I called at the boys level last spring, because that happened a lot more often than you think. I called the National Christian College Championships for Division II last November, where a team that was this close to upsetting the number one team in the country just collapsed because they took on a team that was seasoned in playing those five game matches moving forward. So I think it's really, you have to feel the momentum in the room, but also think about what is making this team tick. What is something that's been unique about them that really gets them fired up? I think it's momentum, but it's about the culture really from the team. So I think if you ask me how it's different than obviously some of the other sports that we do, I think it's because you have to read into the momentum and you have to read into the culture and you have to make the story fun, because if the story's not fun, not many people are going to care, quite frankly. And I think finding those unique points, those unique traditions, and really also too just seeing how the teams can interact with each other is certainly something to note. And that's really kind of what inspires me a little bit, just to kind of tell those stories is, okay, I know, let's say so-and-so team. I'm going to give an example. Last year, whenever I was in Missouri calling some state championship work, they were always known to do like some fancy footwork dancing at the beginning of whatever set they were going to clinch. And then again, they found a way to come back. And my line at the end is Lafayette still dancing. So I think finding little things like that can certainly add to the intrigue when you least expect it. So I could say the same thing over and over and over, quite frankly, but it's momentum, it is team culture, and it's team chemistry. And if you have really those three things in your favor, even for just a moment in time, and the game is going to be maybe not going to go in your favor, at least you can make it fun for a little while. And so that's always what I look forward to.
And let's not even forget, like, even in particular plays, right? We usually talk about all those highlight kills and rally points and whatnot. Think about the times where you have that long rally and it takes forever to get that particular point. And you don't get to see that a lot. You don't see a lot of plays, at least from exposure level, the high school level, because there's just so little availability there. But at the college level, every once in a while, you get to see that on SportsCenter.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the plays that always well, you get to appreciate about the back row and the effort those kids put to get that point, because every point matters in the sport of volleyball, and more so than any other sport I can recall and whatnot.
You hit the nail on the head. And I think those are really my favorite plays to call. Again, when we get to like those 30-second rallies, all right, this is about to get a little interesting. Then we go up to 45. Oh my goodness, it's still going. What a save from the back row. Then you look down at the clock. We've already hit a minute and a half. They're still going, which I think we haven't had a minute and a half, at least from the games I've covered yet this season. But we've gotten close. So I think those are really my favorite points to call, is just those long rallies, because it's just a grind, quite frankly. And even if, even if it's a 5-point advantage and you're still fighting to get that 1 point, you rattle off 2, 3 in a row, force your opponent to get a side out or two, you're back in it.
Yeah, that is for sure. One option for this episode here, obviously last week, Carroll was the site of the first outdoor volleyball match ever in the state of Indiana. I know Nebraska did it a couple years ago when they took on Omaha in 2023. But how much does it feel to have that first one under your belt, the first outdoor volleyball match ever in Indiana, and it's Carroll and Homestead of all teams that get to be part of a big moment in the history of the sport.
I mean, it doesn't surprise me that two teams that have just really continued to rewrite excellence in the state of Indiana for volleyball to do it at that stage. So it's not surprising that it was Carroll and Homestead that got the honors to do it. But I think, again, it's the communities that have been built around those programs for so many years. And just to clarify one thing, we didn't have the call for that on the network. That was actually the student production of Charter Sports Network. So Jared Matheny, professor over there, good work, bud, good work. But I think, seeing that from a very, from a high standpoint, having just that exposure and on a perfect night too, I think those are the things I look at as well. I mean, yes, it's cool. You got to play the first outdoor match, but making it happen in unprecedented circumstances is certainly something to smile at, honestly.
That is for sure. Joe, any final thoughts? And real quick, just kind of talk about what's your schedule looking like coming up here as you get into the first matches of September.
Yes, so we've got 3 prep matches on the week, and then my Indiana Tech season starts coming up on Friday with the Liz Lakowski tournament. So I'm going to be busy with that on the college level coming up this weekend. But in terms of prep, in the next week or so, we've got Homestead and Snyder tomorrow night, or tonight if you're listening to this on Tuesday. Wednesday, we'll have Concordia Lutheran at Leo. Again, both teams trying to rebuild. Both teams still with a lot of momentum, unexpectedly coming this season. We'll see Belmont and Snyder again on Thursday night down in Decatur. Always fun to get down there. And then the week after, we've got some pretty big matchups. We'll get our first glimpse of Woodland coming up in the week after on the 9th. And then we'll have Carroll and Dwenger 1 week from Wednesday. So a lot of great stuff coming for us.
All right, Joe, thank you so much for talking about volleyball, and good luck this week, especially as you transition to calling college.
Hey, it's all about having those Hall's cough drops. Once you've got those, anything can happen. Thanks so much for
Joining me is the head girls volleyball coach of the defending 4A state champion Carroll Chargers as they enter this week 9-0 on the season. A dominant start for the Carroll Chargers of Fort Wayne. And Coach Pandy Sinish, you have been the head coach since 2022. You've been on the staff for about 16 years or so prior as assistant coach and whatnot. So you've been experienced with this program and whatnot. Just talk about how things have been so far for this season as you embrace this state title defense, if you would.
Yeah, coming off of last season, obviously, we have a lot of goals going into this season to be able to challenge ourselves to get to that point again. The start of the season has been a great test so far to prep ourselves for that postseason, but we're also know there's going to be more competition that comes down the line as we continue on with the season. But it's been a great start to get the players comfortable with each other, playing next to each other, and understanding their roles for the season.
As I mentioned earlier, you have been a part of this Carroll program for quite some time now. A lot of success in Huntertown for Carroll volleyball and whatnot. You played volleyball. You played volleyball collegiately at IUPUI. Your daughter is a IU Indy commit. So there's a connection there from the family side of things and whatnot. But for those that are not familiar with you, talk about your background into coaching in volleyball and talk about what you've learned along the way.
Yeah, obviously I've been at Carroll now. This is my 21st year coaching total there with 4 years as head coach. Before that, again, background in a lot of sports, played volleyball in college, but grew up in high school down in Southern Indiana playing volleyball, basketball, softball, and track. Our family has stayed very active in athletics and sports. Getting to be a part of Carroll volleyball when I moved up here, wasn't sure. My husband was from Carroll, but I didn't really know much about it. But getting a chance to start there back in 2005 with Carroll volleyball was just such an awesome experience, a good learning experience in my early years of coaching under Doug Helsum and some other coaches that were there. But definitely, seen a lot of success with our program and being able to continue to grow it year after year.
And we've seen that from over the course of several years with Carroll. And last year they went 33-3 in rout of the Chargers, winning a state championship in Class 4A, taking down the defending champions of that prior season, Hamilton Southeastern, on the road to Ball State, and then beating powerhouse Yorktown along the way. Can you take me through how important it was to get that state championship experience and then be able to finally win something for Carroll that they've been kind of working their way up to this point?
Yeah, ever since I've been at Carroll, we've always been competitive. We've always been one of the top in the area, but just have never been able to get over the hump of, getting deep into the postseason because there is so much talent in the area. And then also sometimes just being used to the situations. And last year, finally being able to overcome some of those challenges and get some of those big wins in the clutch moments, I think will be really good for the girls. I think it'll show that it can be done. And so it'll just give that confidence in those moments. Those teams that consistently get there year after year, part of that is just the comfortability in the situation and the confidence that it can be done. So I'm hopeful that will lead into the girls not being cocky or, expecting anything, but having the confidence to be able to go in and we are a good team and we can pull out a win in this tough situation, because we know we get down into the long road of the postseason that every team's going to be really good and there's no guarantees, and you have to show up and perform in that moment on that day.
Yep. And you return a lot back from that team that won state, including your daughter, Bailey Sinish, but you also have Lauren Peters back on the back row, Sophia Gislin, the center. She's going to Quinnipiac. You got Addie Shippey and Lois Sassy up the middle. I know Sassy's definitely playing collegiately next year for sure. You got sophomore Kayla Hafner at libero. That family alone has a history of talent in volleyball there. Sarah Stagel, just a junior. She's going to Notre Dame in a couple of years. You got a really talented squad. It's a very special group that's played volleyball together for quite some time. Can you take me through what it's like to coach this group beyond the fact that this is a very talented team?
Yeah, we have a ton of talent with those girls that you mentioned and a lot of other girls as well. It's been a fun challenge to be able to continue to push them to get their skills individually, but also how to, mesh together, because talent is definitely not the only factor. On paper, you can be the most talented team, but it's going to be the team that works better together, that has confidence in each other, has trust in each other, has low drama on the court, that typically is going to be the team that can pull out those big wins. So getting them to continue to develop as individual players, but also how are we going to mesh as a team this year? Yes, we only lost one player last year, so that helps have some of that consistency, but it's still a new year and it's a whole new set of challenges in front of us. So just making sure that we get those girls comfortable with situations. They come off a successful club season for all of them, but now they have to play together and it's completely different. So just making sure we keep pushing them and challenging them and getting them comfortable in the environment of our team chemistry.
Mm-hmm. And the mentality's got to be different coming in this season, because now everybody knows Carroll's got that state championship under their belt. So the mentality coming in to prepare for Carroll is completely different as well, because now you're the hunted. You're no longer the hunters in this situation, whatnot. Coach, you experienced a lot with volleyball and whatnot. And in this podcast, we're going to be starting up. We want to know about volleyball, right? So when it comes to volleyball, we know that there are best of 5 sets. We know we want to get to a best of 5 in situation, whatnot. But when it comes to the volleyball beyond the stats, what is the one thing that maybe we don't take enough consideration when it comes to understanding what it takes to understand volleyball and to, understand the fundamentals, if you would, of volleyball?
Yeah, to start off with your first part, I definitely think that it's a different mindset this year. Last year, we were the underdog in the situation and we believed in ourselves, but, we had to prove it. And this year, we know that a lot of teams are going to come after us with a little bit more intensity right off the bat. We've seen that in almost every match we've played so far. Our first set is pretty challenging. They're going hard at us. Once we kind of can exert some control over the game, we can usually settle in. I think that unknown factor that a lot of non-volleyball people don't recognize, because it doesn't always get the highlights, is that backcourt ball control. It's usually your hitters or your blockers, those point ending situations that get the big accolades. But we can only do that when we have great passing and great setting from our back row and our setters, because it's what allows us to be able to have multiple hitting options. And so that's one of the biggest factors that if you don't really know volleyball, you don't always recognize, because sometimes it looks easy, but it's actually probably some of the harder skills to be able to do. The other side of the game that doesn't always get as much recognition is how well you can flow together as a team and be able to, make things work in tough situations. Volleyball is a game of chaos a little bit, and it's really easy when things are going well, but how can you play through the chaos and keep the ball in play is one of the biggest challenges to be able to overcome. I always tell our team, any team can win if you're in system, what we call, when we have good passing, but it's the teams that can win out of system that will allow you to get those extra points in the critical moments.
I always talk about situational communication when in these situations. Volleyball is very hectic, no matter what level it is and whatnot. I mean, I just watched a couple of volleyball matches in Nashville, right, when Purdue was playing Tennessee and Kentucky was playing Nebraska, and you saw a lot of that in various situations because you got the best talent in the country coming in, and they're going to throw you with curveballs and throw you different unpredictable ways that you're not going to be able to see from practice and from film and whatnot. So the back row, I always call it the backbone of the defense. Most important part of volleyball is to have a good deep back row to get things moving for your offense, to get some offense and then get some swing points to go your way and whatnot. So now let's transition over to what took place last week. And Wednesday, Carroll hosted the first Indiana high school outdoor match ever at Carroll's football stadium, right? And this is very reminiscent to what Nebraska did 2 years ago when they hosted Omaha at their football stadium. Can you take me through what was like to prepare for this particular situation? What made it possible in the first place to start off with? And then just talk about what are things you're going to remember about this night beyond the game itself that's going to come with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, leading into it, we were approached by Dr. Ian Nelson in the summertime about if we'd be interested in this. He has a daughter at Homestead, and we kind of said, well, maybe it sounds like a logistic, I'm not sure how it'll work. Our coaching staff had actually brought it up about a year before that. We should try this right after Nebraska had done it. And we said, well, not right now. That's a lot to do. So after Dr. Nelson approached it, we went to Dan Ginder, our athletic director, just to see if there was any interest or possibilities of it. And he was on board with it right away, 100% to see if we could make it happen. We were going back and forth on debating if we should make it our scrimmage to start the year or if we should make it an actual match. Again, working through some game situations and logistics that we had to figure out. But he was able to lock in all the sponsors, again, coordinate so many different aspects, not even counting the volleyball parts of it, and make it come together in about 5 weeks. So much of the media was able to cover it, which helped it to spread, which was amazing. The fact that we were able to pull all this together and make a cool event, but super successful and lots of added components into it was amazing. And then to be able to play in it, I mean, one of my biggest stressors leading into it was the weather. How was the weather going to be? The night before it did rain and there was water on the court. The court actually torn up the day before with a little bit of wind that had to be fixed. And so just some of those unknown factors, because I'm a volleyball coach. I like to coach volleyball. I can do X's and O's and drills. The other stuff, the media and the plannings, that's not necessarily something that I'm great at, but getting to that day and seeing that the weather was coming together, seeing that the logistical components were all coming together, that we had a huge fan base and community support to be able to have that night. Just made it all worthwhile as we played, just looking up into the crowd to see the fans, the numbers, playing under the lights. So memorable. Obviously getting the win out of it was good for us. We wanted to, we expected to, but honestly, it was just the being able to play in front of a huge crowd with huge community support will be something I'll never forget. Looking back at some of the pictures and seeing some of the sunset pictures in the background, and then the balls against that sky background. These girls, like I've told some others, they play so much volleyball over the last 10 years. They've played over 500 volleyball games or more through high school and club. And this is one game that they won't get to replicate very often, if at all. And so I think it's a memory that they'll all treasure forever.
Oh, I'm sure. And it would be probably the start of a trend in the future for other schools in the future to try this experiment out. Because I know there were people from all over the area, all over the state, that had their eyes on this particular match, and something that we will remember for quite some time. And whatnot. I want to ask one question on the side note before I transition to my next question. Women's sports has grown so much in the past several years and whatnot. Volleyball obviously getting a lot of attention. I mentioned earlier about the tournament that was televised on ABC and whatnot. How much has volleyball grown so much in the last 5 years? So, because I've seen women's sports just skyrocket through the roof on the national space.
Yeah, women's sports in general definitely has been growing over the last few years. Obviously, with volleyball, I have a little bit more experience with that. So, seeing the growth, again, I've been over 20 years at Carroll, and in our first few years of coaching there, about half of our girls played club. A lot of girls that we got were newer to the sport, didn't have a lot of experience. And over the last 10 years, that has completely changed to where, really our girls at Carroll that we get have now been playing volleyball for multiple years, not, definitely middle school, sometimes even before that club opportunities have been able to give them more exposure. Which has upped our numbers and just the love of the sport. I think girls come to our summer camps and they're like, oh, I play volleyball in gym and it's so fun. But then they come to our camps and they get more exposure and opportunity to get that interest really going, and the love for the game start to get established. And, club is great. And I think it's provided a lot of opportunities for the girls. I do think, as club continues to grow, I hope they find a way to manage that balance to make sure that they can still be kids. Because like for me, I'm a huge proponent of multi-sport athletes. And, I love a volleyball player that can also play basketball, or a volleyball player that can go out and play softball or run track or whatever it is. And so making sure that we keep that balance as they get the exposure and the love for the game so that they can, have that youth experience of being able to do a lot of different opportunities. But the growth in the sport has been huge, and the talent shows that, because our teams now compared to 10 years ago are definitely head to head so much more talented, and mostly because of the opportunities they've been given.
That is for sure. As we look ahead to Carroll's schedule, and you got a matchup on Wednesday, you're hosting Columbia City, but afterwards, you're going to have a tournament on Saturday. You're going to be facing Zionsville and the powerhouses Hamilton Southeastern. You're quite familiar with them. That will be an interesting weekend for your team. And then you got a couple of Fort Wayne schools next week with North of Dwayne. Then you got Belmont, Warsaw, and another tournament where you're facing Yorktown, Noblesville, Concordia, and then you're going to Homestead again later on in October and whatnot. As you get into kind of the halfway mark of the season, you're undefeated. So obviously you're doing a lot well for your team, but as a coach, you have to be thinking there's always room for improvement and whatnot. How do you continue this wave of momentum as you get into September, looking to play as good a volleyball as you possibly can as you get closer and closer to the playoffs?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I've been super proud of our success so far, but at Carroll, we're not part of a conference, so that allows us to schedule outside of Fort Wayne, most of that meaning weekend games. We've done our best over the last few years to continue to load our schedule with strong teams, not only from the Fort Wayne and, our extended area, but as we get into Indianapolis and the northwestern part of the state. And so those games are starting to come up, and I love the start of our schedule because it allows us some time to settle in, to get to know each other. But I'm very excited for like this weekend, and as these challenging matches continue to come up, to see how we will step up in that moment, both to the pressure, to, knowing the ball's not just going to go down on first attempt on an attack, that we're going to have to be ready to, go longer rallies, that we're going to have to play better defense than what we've been playing, and those kinds of things. And win or lose those games, they're learning opportunities. Obviously, it's always great to win. Everybody feels better after a big win, but we want to win in the postseason. And by playing these challenging matches, win or lose, it'll help prepare us both physically and mentally for what it's going to take in the postseason.
Yeah, it will be a preview of what's going to come in 4A, not only because of the competition, but because of just the formatting in general. You're playing multiple games on Saturday. That's going to happen in the postseason at some point. So learning how to adapt and get yourself reset from one match to another is always very important when you prepare for the playoffs. Coach, any final thoughts before we let you go?
No, just thanks so much for, spreading the word of women's volleyball. We love it, and we love any kind of, opportunity to get the name out there, to get fans in the crowd. These girls put their whole heart, souls, bodies, everything into the game. They're bruised, battered, exhausted constantly. So just being able to have support for these girls means everything to me as their coach, because I know how much they put into it, and we appreciate others recognizing that too.
Thank you, Coach. Good luck to you, Pandy, Sinish, and your Carroll Chargers as you prepare for a difficult next few weeks coming up for your team, the undefeated Chargers.
Thank you.